morning. Welcome back here at ESCMID Global TV. My name is Judith Cohen, and I'm very happy to introduce my next guest who is live here in the studio with me. And that is no one less than ESCMID Global's movie session moderator, Bill Hanage. A warm welcome to you, Bill.
Hi, Judith. It's good to be here.
Yes, and we know that the ESCMID Global movie session has already taken place, so we are just too excited to, hear from you how it went, what it was like. So let's just start off. What is the movie session?
The movie session is an idea that we had a few years ago to take a movie, something that's from popular culture, but which features infectious disease, and then show it and talk about it and discuss the things it got right and things it got wrong, and the kind of things that we might be able to learn from it, because sometimes movies are more on the button than you might have imagined.
Yeah, and this year's movie was Contagion?
That's correct. Came out in 2012, back in those, sunlit uplands of 2012 before all the bad pandemic stuff happened.
Yeah, and it's a classic pandemic story with a virus.
It is.
Can you just give a little bit of the outline or the scope of the movie?
Certainly. It's a virus loosely based on Nipah, which becomes capable of respiratory spread, having shuffled up viruses from a bat and a pig, and which has a very, very short course of disease and about a 20% mortality rate. And it follows the scientists and some of the regular folks and their responses to it. And a large part of it, and Judith, this is one of the things which is really interesting, a large part of the movie concerns itself with misinformation and how difficult it is to have a good, adequate response in the face of so much misinformation.
Yeah. And how did they deal with that in the movie?
In the movie, it's personified by Jude Law, with an accent which I was not able to quite define. It may have been Australian or something, but it sounded a bit London.
But he is British, right?
He is British, yes, but he was... and he plays this character who he's a huckster, he's a grifter. He starts pushing this sort of homeopathic or something remedy called forsythia on the internet and makes himself millions. And he is considered to be a reasonable source. He's invited onto CNN. And this is something which people are still dealing with, even at the end of the movie when a vaccine is available. There are folks who would prefer to take the thing which does not work and for which there is no evidence.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's actually pretty realistic.
Yeah. Do you know anything about how the movie was received prior to the COVID pandemic?
I know a little bit of it. I mean, just for context, I'm a professor of infectious disease epidemiology. Yeah. When it came out, we went to watch it, and there was like an empty movie theater other than one person who must have wondered why there was a line of people sniggering. It was pretty well received in the press, and certainly among the general public. I think it was also pretty well received among professionals, because it is much, much more realistic than the movie we talked about last year, which was Outbreak.
Yeah.
However, it still has a number of ways in which it diverges from reality.
Yeah. And that is something that you discussed in the session, or did you quiz it?
Well, we actually had a quiz. We had 20 questions which people could watch the movie, try and answer if they were participating. And I have to say that I'm not sure how many people actually finished the quiz, but it was a lot of folks. Only one person got all 20 correct, and they won some ESCMID swag to take away with them. But the things which were different in the movie, or things which were wrong in the movie, were, for me at least, the thing which I noticed primarily is that, because I'm quantitative, the way they handled the math was extremely peculiar. And in fact, the disease that they were talking about would have infected the entire planet in probably a month or less, given the things that they were that they were showing. But they didn't show that in the movie because it wouldn't be good for Hollywood.
No. It still has to be fun to watch.
Yeah, it still has to be fun to watch.
And if I recall correctly, Gwyneth Paltrow dies spectacularly.
Gwyneth Paltrow dies very, very early on, and so she doesn't actually get to, talk about any of her fairly peculiar ideas of wellness and medicine, because her character is shuffled off the scene pretty early on.
Yeah.
It does have a number of things which are absolutely prescient, really, really amazing. There is a scene in which the virus is reported to have started infecting an immunocompromised population and then become more transmissible. And that was something which in the movie was that was a sort of a pipe dream. But of course, since then, we've had COVID, and we've seen the emergence of COVID variants, and they are widely considered to have emerged from long-term persistent infections in immunocompromised or otherwise suppressed individuals.
Yeah.
So that was something that Hollywood got right before we got it right.
Wow. How did they do that? Do you think that Hollywood is being informed by someone from the expertise?
Well, I do know that there was substantial professional advice on this movie.
Yeah.
Ian Lipkin, who's a virologist in New York, he consulted extensively for the movie, and Kate Winslet's character, she plays an epidemic intelligence service officer, was apparently informed by shadowing real folks doing that job at the CDC.
Okay.
So the people making the movie, they did have to cut corners in order to make something that was dramatically exciting.
Yeah.
But they did also know a lot more than you might have imagined.
They really
about
did
the
their
real
homework.
world. Yes, they did their homework.
Yeah. So, what do you think is the biggest lesson learned from this movie?
I think the biggest lesson you might learn from the movie and from looking at the movie is, firstly, how much of what we know about infectious disease, responding to infectious disease emergencies, is sort of a playbook about what we think is going to happen, and then when you look at what really happens, that playbook can dissolve.
Yeah.
Because the big difference, from my point of view at least, between contagion and reality is that contagion is a fantasy. It's a Hollywood view of what an infectious disease emergency looks like.
Yeah.
And a real infectious disease emergency doesn't look like that.
No.
It looks like something which is highly transmissible, but which is not that virulent. And so by the time we even recognize that there's a monster on our doorstep, there are so many people infected that it's too late to be doing much about it.
Yeah.
I personally think that there's a huge contrast between contagion and outbreak. Outbreak was...
that was an Ebola-like fire?
It was Ebola-ish. I don't think it was ever defined. It involved a monkey who was... One of the things I've noticed about these movies is there's this big overlap between the cast of the popular sitcom Friends. The guy who played Ross and Monica's dad has a very key role in Contagion. Oh. And in Outbreak, Marcel, the monkey, the same actor or the same monkey plays the key index host, which the movie is largely about how the authorities are attempting to track them down.
Oh, wow.
So this is very... I will say correlation is not causation. I don't want to suggest that there's anything about Friends that makes it particularly associated with infectious disease.
But if you've got a monkey who's a talented actor
a monkey
in the field of an infectious disease.
A monkey that's a talented actor, they don't grow on trees. So, I think that, this is something that you really want to work with if you're able to have such a thing.
Yeah. But the biggest contrast between Outbreak and Contagion would be it really involved science-wise.
Yes. Outbreak has very many points at which we would pause the movie and just go, wait, what? Whereas in Contagion, there are far fewer. Yeah. There is a point at which a person who is apparently some kind of infectious disease modeler makes a statement which is, makes absolutely no sense from a mathematical sense, but most people aren't going to notice that. No. And so it works far better as a depiction of what it's really like responding to infectious disease. Yeah. And there is a subplot also involving Marion Cotillard, who is kidnapped and held by a community that is very anxious that they're going to be overlooked because they wish to have access to therapies and vaccines as soon as they become available. Yeah. We have seen issues with vaccine sovereignty and vaccine access and all of these things that we came to know all too well in the year since 2020. Yeah. So now, of course, this begs the question, what's really going on in epidemiology now? And I think the big thing that we're all looking at, or at least where I live, which is the United States, is H5N1 influenza, which has proved itself extremely capable of infecting a large number of mammal species, despite being called bird flu. Yeah. Now, bird flu is not just for the birds. It's obviously very capable of transmitting among cattle. And while humans have been infected, there's not really much evidence they've been transmitting so far. Now, personally, I don't think this means that any pandemic is imminent, but I do think always, the unfortunate thing is we will have another flu pandemic. We don't know when, but it will happen. It will be serious. And I really wish that we would all talk a little bit more about how we're going to know when it's happening and what we're going to do in response.
Do we need a movie about it first?
Maybe we do need a movie about it.
Before we wake up.
But unfortunately, I think the aftermath of COVID, Judith, means that anybody making such a movie wouldn't find as large an audience for it as you might have hoped.
No.
So it's up to people like us to try and make the case for being prepared for future infectious disease threats.
Is that also one of the learnings that comes forth from an ESCMID Global Movie Session, that you're really looking with the attendants towards pandemic preparedness and really raising that issue? Absolutely. And I think we're also hoping to be able to get the insights from the people who come along, the attendants, because, you know, goodness knows, I don't know everything. And so, in fact, some of the people who were attending and offering their thoughts on the movie did raise a number of points that we hadn't thought about or we hadn't prepared while watching it through beforehand. I mean, one which was extremely important and relevant is how hard it is if you're dealing with an outbreak which is occurring within a low or middle income country, where there may not be resources to respond to it, and there may be considerable political pressure to hide evidence of it. Now, this is something which, you know, again, should be top of mind. Transparency is very important, and it's very hard to achieve. But again, having watched the movie, having talked it through, I think we all understood things a little bit better, or I hope we did. Well, and with regard to the bird flu, or the flu that you're referring to, and the threat of that maybe or potentially becoming a pandemic, it is sort of a reality show already, but you're still facing this world of science misinformation, because that's something you said at the beginning of our talk. Yes. That was something that was also large in the movie in Contagion. Yes. But that's possibly also just as big a threat, because it undermines everyone taking anything seriously in the future. You're so right, and it is the world in which we live. It's very important for public health authorities to be trusted and to be able to give people the best information, the best science, to be clear when things are changing because there's uncertainty and we've got a little bit more information. And that's hard to do at the best of times. But now we have a whole internet ecosystem that is entirely geared to generate clicks and engagement rather than asking any questions about what people are clicking and engaging with. So I do think that we need to be consistent in the messages that we're putting out, but I also think we need to be smarter. We need to be able to think a little bit more and get a little bit better at engaging with people where they are coming from, and make sure that we don't sound like we're just wagging our fingers, because people tend to turn away from that. Well, this makes it clear that you weren't just watching a movie yesterday with some participants of ESCMID Global, but this was really also about very, very serious things and very realistic threats. Unfortunately, it's true. Thank you so much for taking the time and effort to come to our studio and telling us a little bit more about this. Thank you, Judith. It's a pleasure to be here on the ESCMID sofa. Yes, wonderful. Well, if you want to see more guests here in our ESCMID Global TV live studio, we will be back at 11 o'clock with the art gallery winners. So join in then and take a look with us to see which art won prizes and why. Hope to see you then.